Most people think ranch stories are all the same: cattle, fences, weather, and long quiet nights. But if you'd been standing beside me in the North Pasture that October evening, if you'd heard what I heard and seen what I saw, you'd understand why my family won't go near that stretch of land anymore. Not after what happened between those trees. Not after what showed itself. My name is Evan McAllister. I'm 34 years old, born and raised in Salmon, Lemhi County, Idaho, and my family has worked the same 600 acres just off Highway 93 for 3 generations. I know these hills and pastures the way most guys know the back seats of their trucks. Every ridge, every game trail, every normal sound a night out here should make. Which is exactly why, on October 12, 2022, I knew something was wrong long before I ever saw the creatures. It had been a cold snap, one of those early fall nights where the temperature dies without warning. Around 34 degrees, clear sky, no moon, and the kind of dry cold that makes metal ring when you touch it. I'd gone out around 8:40 p.m. to check the fencing along the North Pasture, because the cattle had been bunching up along the southern end all day. They weren't grazing. They weren't wandering. They were avoiding something. Cows don't do that unless there's a damned good reason. I took my maglite, the Ruger American .308 slung over my shoulder, and drove my old '09 F250 up to the north line. Cell service drops to nothing on that back slope, always has, so I told my wife, Sarah, I'd be 20 minutes. But even before I stepped out of the truck, I could smell something. Off. It was faint at first. A musk, mixed with something sharp and metallic. Not a bear. Not a cougar kill. Something wrong. The kind of smell that hits the back of your throat, like hot copper and wet fur. I stood there a moment, listening. Usually at night you'll hear coyotes yipping across the valley, or the wind moving through the cottonwoods. But that night was still. Too still. No bugs. No wind. No distant cattle. Nothing. The whole pasture felt sucked dry, like the land was holding its breath. I tried to shrug it off. Told myself it was just the cold. Just the dark messing with me. I've worked enough late nights on this ranch to know when paranoia starts creeping in. But then the dog refused to get out of the truck. And that dog will chase anything. Wolves, raccoons, hell, even my brother's ATV once. But that night he sat frozen on the passenger seat, ears pinned, staring at the tree line with his lip trembling. Not curled. Trembling. Like pure instinct was telling him don't you dare. That's when the first sound rolled across the pasture. A long, low howl, not like a wolf, not like a coyote. Deeper. Two-toned. It started high, then dropped into something chest vibrating and hollow, like it was echoing inside a huge barrel. It came from the stand of timber on the far slope, right where the fence meets the BLM land that leads up toward the Bitterroot Range. I felt my pulse nail itself to my ribs. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered, scanning with the flashlight. I've heard wolves all my life. This wasn't one. Whatever made that sound was bigger. Heavier. Closer. I hit the fence line anyway, because that's the job. The cows were already refusing to graze, and with predators coming down earlier every year, someone had to be checking for breaks. The beam from my maglite cut across the frost-glazed grass and the old posts, each one throwing a long, black shadow. That's when I saw the tracks. At first I thought they were someone's dog, but they were too big. Way too big. 5 toes. Deep impressions like something heavy moved on the balls of its feet. And the stride, 6, maybe 6.5 feet apart. That's not a wolf. That's not anything I've ever seen in Idaho. I crouched and ran my hand beside one print. My palm looked small next to it. The air felt thick then, like the temperature dropped another 10 degrees. My breath fogged out in long, shaky puffs. Somewhere in the dark, a branch snapped. Loud. Deliberate. Followed by another. And another. Something was moving out there. The cattle bunched against the far fence suddenly lowed, a panicked, guttural sound, and a few started trotting toward the lower pasture. Cows don't scatter unless death is in the air. I tightened my grip on the rifle. I know this sounds crazy. I know how it sounds. But I've been on this land since I could walk. I can tell a deer from an elk at 300 yards. I can pick out cougar tracks even when they're half melted in the snow. I don't scare easy. But that night? That night I felt something watching me. Something big. Something smart. And listen, before I go any deeper into this, if you've ever been out in the woods and felt eyes on you, if you've ever heard something move that shouldn't move the way it did, hit that like button. Because what comes next is the part one still can't talk about without my hands shaking. I raised the flashlight toward the tree line. That's when I saw the first silhouette. Tall. Upright. Broad shoulders tapering down to long, thick legs. Its head was angled, almost canine, but too high off the ground to be anything natural. It stood there, perfectly still, like it had been waiting for me to notice it. My throat tightened. The dog whimpered from the truck cab. And then, God help me, I realized there was a second one. This one moved lower to the ground, shoulders rolling like a wolf preparing to pounce, but with the size of a man wearing a fur coat 3 layers thick. Its eyes caught my flashlight for half a second, pale, cold, almost blue, and then it slid back into the shadow like smoke. My brain scrambled for explanations. Costume. Optical illusion. Someone playing a sick prank. Anything. But the smell hit me again, wet dog, rot, iron, and my gut told me the truth before my mind would accept it. The upright one turned its head slowly toward me. And it took a step. A heavy, ground-shaking step. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my teeth. Every instinct I had screamed to run, but my legs locked. The beam of my flashlight jittered in my hand, bouncing off branches and frost. Another step. Closer. Intentional. That's when both creatures snapped their heads toward each other. A low, vibrating growl rippled the air between them, two predators sizing each other up, bracing for something violent. And right there, in that freezing, moonless pasture, with 600 acres of empty land between me and the nearest neighbor, I realized I wasn't watching one impossible creature. I was watching two, and they were about to fight. The grass shifted. The cattle moaned in terror. The dog hid under the dashboard. And I whispered the words that would mark the beginning of the worst night of my life. What the hell are you? Because that was the moment, right there, when everything went wrong. The moment those two things locked onto each other, the night changed. The air got heavier, tighter, like the sky itself was pressing down on the pasture. I could hear my own heartbeat louder than the wind. Except there was no wind. There was nothing but that awful stillness and the low rumbling growls rolling across the field. The first sound that snapped me out of my trance was a branch breaking clean in half, loud, sharp, like someone stepping on dry firewood with deliberate force. Then another. Then a slow, rhythmic thudding as something huge began circling the cottonwoods. It wasn't random. It wasn't clumsy. It was measured. Predatory. I raised the mag light and the beam shook so hard I nearly blinded myself. Somewhere off to my right, another sound joined in, a deep, chest-vibrating growl that hit me like standing too close to a diesel truck revving low. It wasn't just noise, it felt like it went through me, rattling my ribs. I swallowed hard, the metallic taste of adrenaline thick on my tongue. My hands were slick with sweat despite the freezing air. My breath came short and sharp, every inhale tight, like my lungs had shrunk by half. I tried to convince myself it was wolves. Wolves fight. Wolves posture. Wolves growl. But wolves don't stand 7 or 8 feet tall. They don't move like men. And they sure as hell don't make the kind of smell that was rolling across that pasture. Wet fur, dirt, something coppery and damp, like old blood soaked into soil. The shadows shifted in front of me. The upright one, broad chest, long arms, fur glinting in the flashlight, took another step. It was on 2 legs. Perfectly balanced. Perfectly comfortable. Its breath steamed in the cold air, each exhale a heavy plume. And then the second one moved. The wolf-like one, lower to the ground but still impossibly massive, slid out of the shadows. It moved with a speed and smoothness that didn't match its size. Its fur was darker, matted in places, and its head swung low like it was tracking scent. Those pale blue eyes locked onto the upright one, and it bared its teeth, long, curved, too large for anything natural. Everything went dead silent. The kind of silence you only hear once in your life. No insects. No wind. No cattle. Not even my own breath for a moment. Just a thick, heavy blanket of stillness so complete it made the hair on my arms stand straight up. I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. The cold air felt sharp, like needles pushing into my skin. The flashlight trembled violently in my hand, the beam jittering across fur, branches, frost. The upright one's eyes, amber, reflective, almost human, flicked toward me for half a second. And in that tiny sliver of time, I knew it was aware of me. Not like an animal recognizing movement. Like someone taking note of a witness. My legs nearly gave out. My knees wobbled so badly I had to lock them just to stay upright. My heart hammered so loud I thought the creatures could hear it. The wolf-like one let out a sound then, half snarl, half roar, something deep and primal that made my stomach drop. It crouched, shoulders rolling forward, claws tearing into the soil. The upright creature answered with a growl of its own, lower, more resonant, vibrating the metal of my rifle. I didn't move. I couldn't. I was frozen, stuck between two monsters as they squared off in my pasture like gladiators. The first lunge came so fast my brain barely kept up. The wolf-like one darted sideways, muscles rippling under its fur, kicking up dirt and frost. The upright one turned, pivoting on those powerful digitigrade legs, claws flexing as it braced. They clashed with a sound that didn't seem real, flesh hitting flesh, bones colliding, a wet, heavy impact that echoed across the field. The upright one shoved the other back several feet, sending it skidding through the dead grass. The ground shook beneath me. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the rifle. A cold sweat poured down my spine, chilling even through my jacket. My breath hitched in my throat. My fingers tingled. My mouth went dry as sand. The wolf-like one recovered instantly, shaking its head and letting out that deep, horrible growl again. It circled fast, faster than any animal that size should have been able to move. Its claws raked the earth as it zigzagged, trying to flank its opponent. The upright one followed its movement with terrifying precision. Its head tilted, ears twitching, body lowering into a stance that looked disturbingly intentional, intelligent. It wasn't reacting. It was anticipating. I felt a surge of nausea. The metallic scent of fear coated my tongue, mixing with the smell of wet fur and something decaying. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the rifle stock with both arms just to keep it steady. Then, as if remembering I existed, the upright creature turned its head toward me again. My stomach dropped. It knew I was there. It had known the whole time. My chest tightened painfully. My legs trembled. I couldn't blink. Couldn't breathe. I felt exposed, like a spotlight was suddenly on me. The beam of my flashlight trembled across its face, long snout, powerful jaw, teeth glinting faintly. But it was the eyes that froze me. Intelligent. Calculating. The wolf-like one seized the moment and lunged at its back. The upright creature spun with inhuman speed, claws slashing through the air. The sound, God, the sound, was like tearing fabric mixed with cracking wood. I stumbled backward, tripping over a frozen clump of grass, hitting the ground hard enough to knock the breath out of me. The cold dirt pressed against my palms, gritty and sharp. Pain shot up my wrist, but I barely felt it. My entire focus was locked on the two shapes tearing at each other only yards away. They were fighting. Fighting over something. Territory. Dominance. Food. I didn't know. But whatever it was, I did not want to be caught between them. I scrambled back to my feet, legs unsteady, heart pounding like it was trying to punch out of my chest. Every instinct screamed to run. To hide. To get the hell away from that pasture. But as I turned toward the truck, the upright creature let out a roar so loud, so violent, it rattled my bones. The wolf-like one answered with a guttural snarl that vibrated the ground. And then, both sets of eyes turned toward me. Not at each other. Me. Like suddenly they remembered the lone human in the dark, trembling with a gun that wouldn't matter if either of them decided to close the distance. My mouth went dry. My vision tunneled. I could barely breathe. I forced my legs to move, stumbling toward the truck as the sound of claws tearing into earth erupted behind me. Because that was the moment I realized something far worse than seeing them fight. One of them had decided I was part of the problem. And the other one wasn't about to let me walk away. The moment both creatures snapped their attention toward me, something primitive inside me broke loose, some buried instinct screaming that I was no longer an observer. I was prey. The bigger one, the upright creature, inhaled deeply as if scenting me. The other, lower, faster, shifted its stance like it was about to spring. I didn't think. I just ran. My boots tore through the frost-crusted grass as I sprinted toward the truck, lungs burning instantly from the cold air. Every step felt too slow, too heavy, like the earth was dragging me down. Behind me I heard the unmistakable thud of something massive pushing off the ground. The sound alone froze my blood. It wasn't a run. It was a launch. I dropped flat just as a dark blur shot past me, landing somewhere to my left with a force that shook the ground. Dirt sprayed across my face. My chest hit the earth hard enough to knock the wind out of me. I gasped, sucking in freezing air mixed with the sharp scent of trampled soil. I staggered to my knees and swung the rifle up out of reflex. The wolf-like creature was circling, teeth bared, its breath steaming in thick white clouds. Every muscle under its fur twitched with violent anticipation. Its eyes glowed pale blue, locking onto me like a target it had just claimed. I aimed at its chest, finger trembling on the trigger. Back! I shouted, voice cracking. The creature didn't react. Didn't hesitate. It crouched deeper. I fired. The muzzle flash lit the pasture, the recoil slamming my shoulder, echo rolling over the hills. The round hit, I heard it. A wet, solid impact. The creature jerked sideways, snarling, but it didn't drop. It didn't even stumble. It just shifted its weight, adjusting the way a pissed-off bull adjusts before charging again. My hands shook uncontrollably. My ears rang from the shot. My heart hammered so violently it hurt. Behind it, the upright creature let out a roar, a deep, resonant sound that rippled across the field. Not directed at me. At the other one. They weren't done fighting. My shot had interrupted them. The wolf-like one snapped its attention back toward the upright beast, lips curling, fur bristled. And in that split second of distraction, I scrambled to my feet and sprinted again. The truck wasn't far, maybe 40 yards, but it felt like an entire county separated us. My breath tore in and out of my chest. My legs felt like rubber. My vision tunneled, narrowing down to the dim outline of the truck and nothing else. Behind me the creatures collided again. I heard claws ripping into flesh, snarls turning into something deeper, more violent. Bones thudding against ground. Heavy bodies rolling. A crash as one slammed into the old fence posts. I didn't dare look back. The truck loomed closer, dark metal, frost on the windshield, salvation inches away. I grabbed the handle, yanked the door, and threw myself inside. My dog was already curled in the footwell, shaking. I slammed the door shut just as something hit the bed with a metallic bang that rattled the entire frame. The truck rocked sideways. I screamed without meaning to, a raw burst of terror ripping through my chest. I fumbled for the keys with shaking hands, dropped them twice, cursed out loud, breath fogging up the cab. Another slam rocked the truck. Something scraped across the roof, slow, deliberate, metal screeching under heavy claws. I ducked instinctively, gripping the keys so hard they cut into my palm. My breaths came in harsh, shallow gasps. My vision blurred around the edges. I jammed the key into the ignition. Turned it. The engine ground. Once. Twice. Come on, come on, come on, come on. A deep snarl echoed behind me. The wolf-like thing had circled around. I could feel its presence, like cold air pressing against the back of my neck. The engine roared to life. I slammed the truck into reverse and floored the gas. Gravel and frost spat out behind the tires as the truck jerked backward. Whatever was on the roof skidded off, thudding to the ground. I didn't wait to see which one it was. I spun the wheel, tires sliding, and tore across the pasture toward the gate. In the rearview mirror, two massive silhouettes lunged at each other again, snarling, slashing. One slammed into the other so hard the ground trembled. Their roars carried through the cab even over the engine noise. I reached the fence line, braked hard, threw it into park, and jumped out long enough to yank the gate open with trembling hands. My breath hitched. I glanced back. They were still fighting. But one, the upright one, suddenly stopped. It turned its head. Slowly. Deliberately. It was looking directly at me. Even from that distance, even through the darkness, those amber eyes locked onto mine. A hot bolt of nausea hit my gut. My legs weakened. My throat tightened. I dove back into the truck, slammed it into drive, and peeled out toward the ranch house, headlights bouncing violently as the tires tore over ruts and tufts of frozen grass. My dog crawled into my lap, shaking, whining softly. I held the wheel with one hand, the other pressed to his back, whispering, it's okay, even though nothing was okay and I didn't believe the words myself. Halfway down the hill, I realized something horrifying. The pasture behind me had gone silent again. I slowed for half a second, listening. Then I heard it, running. not on 4 legs. On 2. Heavy, rhythmic impact slamming into the ground behind me, closing distance faster than any human could ever sprint. My lungs seized. My hands locked on the wheel. I floored the truck so hard the engine screamed and the back tires fishtailed. Go. Go. Gravel pinged against the undercarriage. The truck rocketed forward, engine roaring, headlights bouncing wildly over the ruts. I didn't dare look in the mirror. I didn't want to see how close it was. But curiosity, or instinct, forced my eyes upward for half a second. A shadow larger than a man loped across the slope behind me, closing ground with terrifying speed. Arms pumping. Legs kicking up dirt. A silhouette that belonged in nightmares. I tore down the ranch road, skidding onto the main driveway, the truck fishtailing before straightening out. The house lights appeared through the trees like a lifeline. The running stopped. Just stopped. I didn't slow. Not until the truck skidded into the gravel turnout beside the ranch house. I slammed the brakes, killed the engine, grabbed the rifle, and sprinted to the porch, heart in my throat. Sarah burst out the front door the moment she heard me, eyes wide, voice shaking. "Evan, what happened? What was that screaming?" I couldn't answer. Not yet. Not with what was still out there. Not with what I was sure had followed me halfway home. All I could manage was a whisper, breathless and shaking. "They're real, Sarah. And they're not done." By the time the porch light spilled over me, my whole body was shaking so hard I nearly dropped the rifle. I could barely speak. Every part of me was still convinced that if I looked back down the driveway, I'd see one of those monsters standing in the glow of my taillights. Sarah grabbed my arm, guiding me inside, her voice trembling as she asked again and again what happened, but the words wouldn't come out. Not yet. Not while the night behind me felt alive and listening. My brother Tom stepped out of the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes, annoyed at first, until he saw my face. The color drained from his. "What's out there?" he asked, voice low, steady but tight. He'd hunted all his life. He'd seen wolves, cougars, even the aftermath of a grizzly passing through once. But whatever he saw in my expression scared him in a way none of those ever had. "I don't know," I whispered, leaning the rifle against the wall. "2 things. Big. Fast. Fighting. And one of them followed me." The room went silent. Even the old fridge seemed to quiet down, humming softer as if the house itself were listening. We moved to the living room where the big picture window looked out over the yard, the barn visible as a dark silhouette against the lower pasture. I turned off the lamp immediately. Darkness felt safer than a glowing beacon. Sarah shut the curtains, her movements sharp, anxious. The dog crawled under the coffee table and refused to come out. Outside, the wind picked up just enough to push a few dead leaves across the porch, the soft scraping sounds making all 3 of us tense. I gripped the arm of the couch so hard my knuckles went numb. Tom checked the deadbolt. "Start from the beginning," he said quietly. "Slow." I told them everything, my voice breaking in places, throat tight, hands shaking. The smell. The tracks. The silence. The shapes. The fight. The chase. By the time I got to the part where one ran on 2 legs after the truck, Sarah had covered her mouth with her hand, eyes wide, tears welling. Tom just stared, jaw clenched, processing every detail like he was building a map of danger in his mind. When I finished, no one spoke. Because right then, something scraped across the barn wall. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a simple, slow drag of claws against wood, faint but unmistakable in the stillness of the night. Sarah's breath hitched. Tom's eyes flicked toward the window. Mine went straight to the rifle. I moved to the window, lifted the curtain a fraction of an inch. At first all I saw was darkness, moonless sky, the faint glow of the barn's motion light, then the light flicked on. My stomach dropped. A shadow moved behind the barn. Big. Tall. Too tall. I couldn't see clearly, but the silhouette alone sent a wave of cold dread washing through me. Sarah grabbed my arm, whispering, "Evan, don't. Don't look. Don't let it see you." But I couldn't pull away. I had to know if it was one of them. The motion light flickered again, then cut out. We stood frozen, waiting for something, anything. The seconds dragged like hours. Then we heard the gravel behind the house crunch. Not footsteps. A slow drag. A heavy shift. Breathing. Just on the other side of the wall. Tom mouthed silently, "Back door." We moved as one, keeping low. My heart hammered so hard I felt each beat like a punch. My mouth had the metallic taste of fear again, thick and sour. The air inside the house felt too warm, too still. The back door rattled lightly. Not violently. Not like something trying to break in. More like something testing it. Sarah gasped and covered her mouth to keep from making another sound. I lifted the rifle halfway, but my arms were trembling. My palms slicked with sweat. Every muscle in my body tightened. Then the rattling stopped. Silence flooded the house again. A thick, suffocating blanket of nothing. I leaned in slightly, listening hard. That was when I heard it, the softest, faintest exhale on the other side of the door. Slow. Controlled. Like something was smelling the air around the frame. Sarah backed away until her shoulders hit the wall. Tom gripped the handle of the fireplace poker so tight it looked like he might snap it. Then the breathing moved. Along the siding. Past the mudroom window. Toward the front of the house. We rushed to the living room, hearts pounding. I peered through a slit in the curtain and scanned the yard. At first, nothing. Then, right beside the edge of the porch, a shape stepped forward into the faint glow from the window. My breath caught. It was the Dogman, the upright one. 7, maybe 8 feet tall. Shoulders like a linebacker wrapped in fur. Long arms ending in clawed hands that flexed slowly, deliberately. Its head turned slightly, ears twitching, its amber eyes scanning the house. They glowed when the light hit them. Not animal glow. Something sharper. Smarter. It wasn't attacking. It was observing. Studying. My legs nearly gave out. Cold sweat slid down my spine, gathering at the base of my neck. My hand trembled so violently I could barely keep the curtain steady. It took one step toward the porch. The boards creaked under its weight. Sarah whimpered behind me. Tom muttered a shaky prayer under his breath, something he hadn't done since we were kids. The creature sniffed the air again, lifting its head. Its breath came out in a long plume of steam. Its chest rose and fell slowly, rhythmically. It looked at the barn, then back at the house, as if weighing something. Then a deep, guttural snarl erupted from the tree line beyond the pasture. The Dogman's posture changed instantly, straightening, bracing, claws flexing. It turned away from the house and stared toward the sound. Another snarl answered. The wolf-like one. They weren't done fighting. Without warning, the Dogman leapt off the porch with terrifying speed, sprinting across the gravel in a blur. Branches snapped. Heavy footsteps shook the ground. And then silence swallowed everything. We didn't speak. Didn't breathe. Didn't move for what felt like 10 minutes. Finally, Tom whispered, "If they are fighting again, it'll be near the north pasture." He didn't have to say the rest. It meant they'd be close. It meant they'd be back. It meant our house wasn't safe. The hours crawled after that. None of us slept. Every sound outside, the wind, a shifting board, a distant cow lowing, made my skin crawl. My body was exhausted but electric, adrenaline burning through me even as my arms trembled from fatigue. Around 3:12 a.m., the fight erupted again, this time much closer. We heard snarls that shook the windows. Heavy impacts thudding into the ground. Wood splintering near the barn. Something crashing into metal. Sarah clung to me, sobbing silently. Tom stood near the door, weapon ready, breath tight and fast. I peeked through the blinds once. Just long enough to see two massive shapes rolling across the dirt behind the tractor shed. One lifted the other and slammed it into the barn wall so hard dust rained from the rafters. The sound of claws tearing into flesh echoed across the ranch. And then, just before dawn, everything went quiet all at once. No growls. No footsteps. No movement. Just the oppressive, heavy stillness that had haunted the pasture hours earlier. But this time the silence felt different. Not the absence of danger. The anticipation of it. Because in that moment, I realized something that made my blood run cold. The sun hadn't risen yet. The night wasn't over. And whatever survived that last clash was coming closer. The quiet before dawn in Idaho should feel peaceful. It never had weight to it, not until that morning. That silence wasn't calm. It was the world bracing for something. It pressed into the house, into my chest, into my bones. The air felt wrong, charged, heavy, like it was thick with the leftover anger of whatever had been fighting behind the barn. I gripped the rifle and stared at the window, praying for a sliver of light on the horizon. But the sky stayed black, just starting to gray, that awful dead zone between night and morning when the world feels abandoned. A soft thud echoed from outside. Then another. Slow. Intentional. Something moving along the gravel. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it hurt. Tom mouthed, "Stay low," and motioned Sarah behind the kitchen counter. The dog was still hiding beneath the table, ears pinned, trembling silently. Another thud. Closer this time. My breath hitched. The metallic taste of fear coated my tongue, thick and sour. Every instinct I had screamed at me to hide, but survival, real survival, told me something different. If that door came down, we'd have nowhere to run. I moved to the front entry, knees shaking, the rifle hot in my hands despite the cold. Tom flanked the hallway with the poker ready. The house felt unbearably small, every wall suddenly paper-thin. The footsteps stopped directly in front of the porch. None of us breathed. A low exhale seeped through the doorframe, long, slow, deliberate. The wood chilled instantly, like the temperature around the house had dropped 20 degrees in a heartbeat. Something scraped lightly against the siding. A claw. A fingertip. Testing. A deep growl vibrated through the floorboards. I steadied the rifle, though my hands trembled so badly I could barely keep the barrel pointed straight. The sweat on my palms felt icy, my fingers numb and stiff from gripping too hard. Then came a sound that froze me mid-breath. A second set of footsteps. Lighter. Faster. Moving along the side of the house. Not one creature. Both. Tom hissed under his breath, "We're surrounded." I didn't know what was worse, being trapped inside, or knowing that if they broke in, there'd be no time to think, no time to shoot, no time to run. The creatures paced outside, their movement deliberate, methodical. The upright one, the Dogman, I recognized its cadence. Heavy. Controlled. It was the predator that calculated. But the other, the werewolf-like one, moved erratically, pacing, circling, restless with violent energy. At 4:37 a.m., the first attempt came. The Dogman slammed its weight against the front porch support beam. The entire house jolted. Dishes rattled. Sarah gasped, dropping to her knees. Tom swore under his breath, tightening his grip on the poker. Another slam. Harder. The beam groaned under the impact. Dust fell from the ceiling. My heart was beating so hard I felt faint. I could barely swallow. Sweat trickled down my back despite the freezing air seeping through the cracks of the old house. The wolf-like creature started scraping along the south wall, claws scoring long grooves in the siding. A territorial display. It wasn't trying to get in. It was waiting. Letting the other do the real work. I don't know what came over me, fear, adrenaline, some survival instinct born generations deep, but I lunged to the window, ripped it open just enough to aim the muzzle through the gap, and fired toward the shape looming on the porch. The shot exploded through the house, deafening. The recoil smashed into my shoulder. The muzzle flash lit the porch like lightning. The Dogman roared, an enraged, wounded blast of sound, and the porch shook as it backed up fast, snarling violently. But the wolf-like one answered immediately. A screeching howl tore through the darkness. The sound hit me like a physical force, drilling into my ears, rattling my skull. The hairs on my neck stood up. My skin crawled with instinctive terror. Tom grabbed my shoulder. "They're coming in. Move." Before I could turn, something massive slammed into the side of the house so hard the drywall cracked behind the stove. A pot clattered to the ground. Sarah screamed. I spun toward the back hallway where the impact came from. The wall bulged inward, dust raining down, wood groaning under stress. Another hit. Another. Each one deep, booming, powerful, like a battering ram. "They're trying to breach." Tom yelled. I ran to the hallway, rifle raised, pulse screaming in my ears. My mouth tasted like metal. My vision narrowed to a small, trembling frame of focus. The creature hit the wall again, and this time the boards cracked. Not a little. A split formed, running vertically, opening just enough that I could see something through the gap. Gray fur. A shoulder. A flash of pale blue eyes. I fired reflexively. The bullet blasted through the wall, dust exploding outward. A wet grunt followed. Heavy footsteps staggered backward. But then a roar, deep, furious, came from the front porch as the Dogman charged again. The front door flexed inward, hinges groaning under strain. A crack formed along the side panel. I backed up, shaking uncontrollably. "Tom, get ready, if it comes through." It hit the door again. And the house finally lost. The deadbolt ripped through the frame, wood splintering violently. The door bent inward, kicking open halfway, just enough for an arm to shove through. Not a paw. Not a limb. An arm. Long, muscular. Covered in dark fur. Ending in massive clawed fingers that reached blindly into the entry, swiping across the floor, searching. Sarah screamed, muffled by her hands. Tom swung the poker at the arm, metal clanging off bone with a sickening thud. The creature snarled, full-bodied, furious, and the arm snapped back out. Then both creatures roared. The sound reverberated through my ribs, through the floor, through the windows. Pure fury. Pure hunger. I staggered backward into the kitchen, rifle shaking. Then, something shifted in the air. A faint light. Gray blew through the windows. Dawn. Not bright. Not full sunrise. But enough to change something. The creatures hesitated. Their pacing slowed. Their snarling softened into sharp, warning exhales. I could hear them breathing outside, two titans catching scent of each other again. Then, as if the night itself was letting them go, they broke away from the house. I heard them move, one sprinting toward the barn, claws tearing into the dirt, the other following, breathing ragged and furious. Their footsteps pounded across the yard, fading into the direction of the north pasture. I rushed to the window just in time to see them collide again behind the barn, silhouettes thrashing, ripping, slamming into the earth with brutal force. The rising light caught them, just a flicker, enough to see the unbelievable size, the violence, the savagery. Then they disappeared behind the ridge. The sun breached the mountains a few minutes later, golden light spilling across the frost. But the damage was done. The fight wasn't over. They had unfinished business. And dawn wasn't safety. It was just a pause. I lowered the shaking rifle, chest heaving, and whispered the truth I could no longer deny. We survived the night. But this isn't over. The sun wasn't comforting. It didn't warm anything or anyone. It just exposed the truth of what the night had hidden. When the first orange band crept over the Bitterroot Range, the three of us were still standing in the wrecked entryway, staring at the splintered door frame, at the claw marks gouged inches deep into the wood. The house felt different, violated, smaller somehow. Sarah wouldn't stop shaking. Tom's hands were scraped from gripping the poker so tight. And me? My legs kept trembling long after the adrenaline drained away. We didn't talk for a while. None of us wanted to be the first to open the door again. Eventually, Tom stepped forward, breath hitching as he pulled the broken door wider. Cold morning air swept in, sharp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and something else, blood. Not human. Thick, metallic, almost sweet. The yard looked like something had torn through a storm, but only in certain places. The porch railing was cracked clean in half. The gravel was carved with deep, parallel gouges. The siding on the south wall, where the werewolf-like thing had slammed its weight, was peeled outward, boards splintered like kindling. But the ground told the real story. Huge prints, too detailed, too deep to be misidentified, were everywhere. Some were shaped like giant canine paws, but elongated, with an unnatural spread between the toes. Others were more humanoid, but wrong, long midfoot, distinct heel, claws digging several inches into the dirt. The biggest track measured almost 16 inches. I knelt beside one, laying my hand next to it. My palm looked pitiful beside those prints. My breath fogged in shaky clouds as I whispered, "Jesus, this wasn't in my head." Tom crouched beside me. "That's not wolf. Not bear." He ran a finger along one of the claw marks in the dirt, then shook his head. "Nothing we know makes tracks like that." Sarah hugged herself tightly, scanning the tree line with wide, terrified eyes. "Are they still out there?" "They're not gone," I said before I could stop myself. The words slipped out because they were true, and truth hung heavy in the freezing air. They stopped fighting because dawn broke. Not because they were finished. We checked the barn next. The moment I saw the damage, my stomach twisted. The entire back wall was bowed inward, planks cracked and split where one of the creatures had slammed into it. Blood, dark, almost black in the morning light, streaked down the wood in long, smeared lines. Something had dragged itself along that wall. Tom grabbed a rake handle and pushed the barn door open cautiously. The cattle inside had bunched tightly in one corner, eyes wide, sides heaving. They weren't injured, but the panic on them was raw. They didn't look toward us, they looked toward the outside, toward the ridge where the creatures had vanished. Even in daylight, they wouldn't turn their backs to that direction. A few feet from the barn door, near the tractor shed, we found the biggest piece of evidence yet. Hair. A thick clump of coarse, black and gray fur caught on a jagged metal edge. I picked it up carefully. It was almost wiry, dense, and smelled like wet dog mixed with something sour and decayed. I held it in my palm, staring at it, feeling the truth push deeper into my chest. "They're real," I whispered. "They're really real." Tom stepped back, rubbing his face. "We need someone to see this. The sheriff. A ranger. Someone." Sarah's voice broke as she snapped. "And tell them what, Tom? That two monsters tore up our barn fighting each other? They'll lock us up." She wasn't wrong. But doing nothing felt worse. Tom finally said, "Let's call the sheriff anyway. Let them decide what the hell to do." I walked to the truck to grab my phone. The bed had a massive dent, an impact so hard it warped the metal. Deep scratch marks, 3 long lines, ran down the tailgate. My heartbeat quickened again. I swallowed hard. Inside the cab, the dog refused to come out. He sat curled in the footwell, ears pinned flat, staring at the ridge. I reached down to pet him, but his muscles tensed under my hand. He wasn't comforted. He was waiting. Listening. Back in the house, my phone finally got a bar of signal. I dialed the sheriff's office, voice shaky as I tried to sound sane. We had a break-in. Some kind of animals. Big ones. They said they'd send someone out within the hour. When Sheriff Doyle arrived at 7:45 a.m., he took one look at the porch and froze mid-step. He didn't hide his reaction well, eyes wide, jaw tight, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "What the hell happened here?" he murmured. We walked him through the damage, the claw marks, the broken boards, the tracks, the fur. He listened, but he didn't interrupt. The longer the tour went, the more pale he turned. When we reached the prints near the barn, he crouched down slowly, running his hand over one impression. He exhaled long and low. "This isn't a bear. And it sure as hell ain't a wolf." "So what is it?" Tom asked. Doyle shook his head. "I don't know. But whatever it is, it's big. And smart." He didn't write a report. He didn't take photos. Instead, he stood and looked toward the ridge, lips pressed thin. "You folks stay inside at night. Keep your rifles loaded. I'll make a call to Fish and Game, but they're gonna blame mountain lions or wolves. They always do." Sarah wrapped her arms around herself again. "Are we safe?" The sheriff didn't answer right away. He looked at the barn wall. The shredded siding. The huge prints. The blood. Finally he said, "Until someone figures out what's moving through this valley. I can't promise that." After he left, the fear didn't ease. It grew heavier in the silence he left behind. That afternoon, exhaustion hit hard. I felt like I'd been awake for days. My arms trembled from adrenaline crash, my vision blurred, my head throbbed. My body kept replaying the night, sounds, smells, claws scraping metal, the moment the door almost failed. But it wasn't just fear anymore. It was knowing there was proof. Tracks, hair. Damage. A sheriff who didn't laugh us out of the room. All afternoon, I researched. Upright canines in Idaho. Bitterroot sightings. North Fork legends. Reports going back decades. Ranchers whispering about night walkers. Hikers describing something stalking them along the ridge. It wasn't just us. We'd stumbled into a territory dispute. A real one. Between two predators we didn't have names for. By evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and shadows stretched across the fields, an awful realization settled over me like a weight I couldn't lift. This wasn't a one-time event. The creatures had fought on our land. They'd left their marks on our walls. Their tracks led into our pastures. They'd be back. Because whatever they were fighting over, whatever they wanted, it wasn't finished. And night was coming again. It's been months now, but the ranch hasn't gone back to normal. People talk about trauma like it's something that fades if you give it enough time, but that's not how this works. Not when the thing that traumatized you is still out there. Not when the land itself remembers. I don't sleep the way I used to. I used to fall asleep fast after a long day of ranch work, body tired, mind empty, listening to the low hum of the wind rolling off the Bitterroot Range. Now I lie awake until 2, 3, sometimes 4 in the morning, waiting for the sound of gravel shifting outside the house, or the soft exhale of something enormous sniffing around the windows. Even when it's dead quiet, I can't trust it. Silence has a different meaning now. Silence means possibility. It means danger. Tom moved into the spare room for a few weeks after the attack, claiming it was so he could help reinforce the place, but I knew the truth. He didn't want to be alone at his own house when night came. He finally went back home in December, but he still calls every night just before sunset, checking on us, making sure nothing strange happened during the day. The strangest part is that daytime always looks normal. Almost peaceful. If you drove past the ranch on any sunny afternoon, you'd think it was the safest place in the world. Cattle grazing, hawks circling, faint smell of juniper in the breeze. But when the light starts slipping behind the mountains, the energy shifts. It's like the land tenses. The shadows stretch too far. The cows bunch up without being herded. The dog hides under the porch. And always, the north pasture stays empty. We fenced it off 2 days after the sheriff came. I put up metal signs warning about unstable ground, though that wasn't the real reason. The real reason was the tracks we found in the snow a week after the attack. Big ones. Deep ones. Fresh ones. They led right across the north pasture. And there were 2 sets. One set of massive canine prints with a stride length nearly 6 feet. And another set, humanoid, but elongated, claws digging into the crusted snow. They crossed paths, looped, circled each other. Then vanished into the tree line. It wasn't over. They were still here. Still watching. Sarah refuses to go anywhere near that fence now. She won't leave the house after dark. She won't let our dog outside alone. Even the sound of wolves howling on the ridge, something that used to be part of the soundtrack of our lives, sends her into tears. She told me once, voice trembling, "It's like the night has eyes now." I know exactly what she means. Just before Christmas, a rancher from about 5 miles north stopped by unexpectedly. He's the kind of man who never asks for help and never complains about anything. But he pulled into our driveway pale and jittery, looking around like something was following him. He said he'd lost 2 head of cattle overnight. No tracks leading in. No tracks leading out. No blood trail. But the cows were simply gone, and the remaining herd refused to graze near the timberline afterward. When he described hearing something big moving on 2 legs near his barn, he wouldn't meet my eyes. When he mentioned the strange musk in the air, he watched my reaction carefully. When I finally nodded, confirming that he wasn't crazy, he let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped in his chest for a year. Word spread quietly after that. Not out loud, never publicly. But ranchers know how to read land, read animals, read danger. A few of them asked if we'd been hearing things at night. One admitted he'd seen a silhouette cross the ridge at dusk, tall as a man but moving wrong. Another claimed he found claw marks on his chicken coop 7 feet off the ground. Everyone plays it off with a laugh, but the fear sits behind their eyes. The Bitterroot has a reputation for strange things, old stories whispered around hunting camps, giant dogs, upright wolves, night roamers. Most folks write them off as legends. I don't. I've seen them. Some nights, when the wind dies down and the sky is clear, I swear I still hear them out there on the ridge. A distant growl carried across the valley. A howl too deep to be wolf. Sometimes it's 2 voices overlapping, one low and guttural, the other sharp and violent. I'll stand on the porch with the rifle and feel every hair on my arms rise, every cell in my body screaming that I'm being watched. And then there are the footprints. About a month ago, early February, after a fresh snowfall, I walked out to check the generator. I don't know why I glanced toward the north fence. I avoid that side of the property intentionally, but something made me look. Tracks. 2 of them. Side by side. One set heavy and deep. The other lighter, but longer. Both leading toward the pasture. Both returning toward the ridge. They weren't there the night before. I followed them as far as the fence, my breath fogging in slow, shaky clouds. The snow was pristine except for those prints. No deer. No elk. No coyote. Nothing. The world had gone still again. Too still. The creatures hadn't just passed through. They were patrolling. They knew this land. They were comfortable here. And they remembered it. Sometimes, late at night when sleep refuses to come, I replay the moment that upright creature turned toward me in the pasture. The look it gave me, those amber eyes, sharp and aware, wasn't animal instinct. It was recognition. A warning. Maybe even something territorial. As if I'd stepped into the middle of something older and bigger than I could understand. People online talk about dogmen, werewolves, cryptids. Some treat it like a joke, some like a religion. After what I've seen, I don't believe the stories fully, but I sure as hell don't dismiss them anymore. These things aren't supernatural. They're not ghosts or curses. They're predators. Apex predators. Intelligent ones. And they're still out there. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't fired that shot in the pasture. If I had stood there frozen a second longer. If the dogman hadn't been distracted by the other creature. If dawn hadn't broken when it did. I wonder how close I came to dying that night. But the thought that keeps me awake isn't that I almost died. It's that they let me live. Because the land out here keeps secrets. The mountains watch us more closely than we watch them. And some nights, when the shadows stretch long across the fields, I feel something shift in the darkness, like a reminder. A reminder that they are not gone. That the night is never empty. That the ridge remembers my scent. I still check the windows every night before locking up. I still avoid the north pasture like it's radioactive. I still feel that same cold ache in my chest every time a branch snaps outside after dark. And I know, deep down, that whatever they were fighting over out there, they're still fighting. Some things in this world aren't meant to be understood. Only survived. But the truth is simple, and it follows me like a shadow. I wasn't alone that night. And I know, they know. I never will be again.